Hello everyone and welcome back to a novel review, the book podcast, where I, Seamus, review a different book every week. If you are a lover of literature and just joining me for the first time, you are definitely in the right place because I do a different book every week. This week is a little different. I guess it's kind of a bit of a bonus because I'm actually doing 4 books. These are just 4 books that I read over the summer months that I haven't had the opportunity to do an episode for and wanted to include, so I thought I'll just do an episode where I review my summer reads. I do want to say, though, that there's nothing about these books that is particularly summary. These are just 4 books that I read. There's really nothing summary about them at all. So I just want to get that out of the way in case you were thinking that it was going to be hot weather in Italy or something like that, nice sunshine and beaches. Not really anything like that, just kind of 4 books that I read over summer. Before I get into the books, though, if you would like to like and subscribe, I would greatly appreciate that. Your support is absolutely fantastic. I love all your comments. I love the emails that you guys send me. I really do appreciate it. Thanks so much for everyone that supports the pod. I greatly appreciate that, and I don't think I say it enough, so thank you so much if you do support the pod. I really do appreciate it. I love all your suggestions when you send me suggestions for books, because I just love receiving ideas and suggestions for episodes, and always love having a great list of great books to consider when I'm looking for books in bookshops, so I greatly appreciate that as well. Thank you so much. If you would like to like and subscribe, did I say that already? I don't know. Click the duck in the corner, 5-star reviews, all that shebang. I think that's enough yapping. Let's get on with the episode. Okay, let's get into the 4 books. I am going to be reviewing these in no particular order, so let's start with the bottom because it's the biggest. The Fisherman, a novel by John Langan. I'm going to hold it up for the benefit of those on YouTube, and if you are on YouTube, I hope you do appreciate the cover. It is an absolutely fantastic artwork. It is one of the reasons I really wanted to read this book. I'm just trying to find here it is. The cover is called, the artwork on the cover, I should say, is Puget Sound on the Pacific Coast, 1870 by Albert Burstart. It's a sick cover. I really love it. I love the artwork. I was searching for this particular edition for a very long time. I saw another one where it had a different cover, and I decided not to buy that because I particularly wanted this cover. On the cover it says it's an epic yet intimate horror novel, and it just had the makings of a really great story. The word cosmic horror has been thrown around a lot when I was reading reviews about this book, and I was really, really excited to sink my teeth into this story. I'm going to be honest though, I think it just missed the mark for me a little bit. I don't know if I just built it up too much and it just didn't hit the mark of expectation for what I was expecting, or it just didn't go down the route I was expecting for what I thought was going to be a really great story. I think a very brief overview is in order. This is essentially 2 stories within one story. The first story follows these 2 men as they both lose their wives through 2 different incidents across 2 different time periods, and then they find each other and they have a collective interest in fishing, and so they develop this friendship and go fishing on weekends and all this kind of thing. The second man finds this name that he's quite interested in. It's called Dutchman's Creek, and it's a place he wants to try fish at. And someone in a local town sort of warns them about Dutchman's Creek and says it has quite a spooky history, a folklore history. And then this local town's member launches into a story telling the folkloric horror tale of this creek. And that's where we get the second story, this kind of backstory, this flashback story. And then it comes to the third part of the story where we resume our narrative with the 2 men and they go to this creek, and then it's sort of the horror story of what happens from them visiting this creek. What I found really interesting is this flashback scene is actually longer. So even though we open with these 2 men and sort of develop an interest in these men and their lives and their stories and this idea of the mystery surrounding Dutchman's Creek, the second story, this flashback, is actually longer than the first half and the first third and the third combined. So it's kind of like, is this story, even though it's a tale being told within the story, the central story that I'm meant to be engaged in? It kind of feels like it's not going to last that long, and then you realize it's actually longer than everything else. It's 150 pages. So I think that kind of drew me out a little bit. And then the final third of the story, the actual horror component of the story, I think just missed the mark for me a little bit. And this could just be my fault because I wasn't expecting it to go the route that it did, this kind of cosmic horror that it went down. The story for me just didn't feel like it was founded in anything. There was nothing really driving the central theme of the story. Maybe I missed something, and that's very possible as well. If you did absolutely love this story, please do let me know, because it just felt like the central horror of this story, the fisherman that it kind of pops up at this Dutchman's Creek. It didn't feel like his state in the story was founded in anything. It didn't really feel like he had a solid place in the story. He just kind of popped up without explanation. And maybe that's part of the horror within itself, the fact that it's an unexplained power within this world. Maybe that is the kind of horror beneath the horror that we need to recognize. I will say I did quite enjoy the final chapter of the story, because it's not really a twist, but there is a moment that kind of like really leaves you almost on a cliffhanger at the end of the story. But again, it didn't really have that much of an emotional effect to me, because I just felt like it wasn't founded in anything, and I didn't really understand the boundaries of this horror, the horror aspect of the story. I didn't understand the boundaries of this mythological character going on. It didn't seem like he had any kind of boundaries within the story. There was no real reason he had to be at this particular creek. Again, I might have missed something, but then for me, it just felt like the story missed something. So even though I had fun reading it, it missed the mark for me a little bit, and I'd probably rate it a 3.5 out of 5. So that was The Fisherman, a novel by John Langan. 5 out of 5 for cover, though. It was a stunning cover. I absolutely rate the cover. Next up, we have Perfection by Vincenzo Latronico. This is the Fitzcarraldo edition. I love these covers, just very simple. The branding of them is just masterful, blue cover, white text. This story is a really interesting one. It's about a couple that are expats. They're quite young and they're trying to find their feet within the world. And I guess I found it really, really interesting, especially in the first sort of third of the story, because I myself am an expat. I'm from Australia, but I'm living in England. And it's clear that Vincenzo Latronico, the writer of the story, has clearly been through something like this himself, because he hits the nail on the head for a lot of the feelings and the imposter syndrome you feel in the early stages of moving to a new country, and the struggles of trying to find new friends and establish yourself and find your own solid foundations within a new community. I think he absolutely nailed it on the head. Pretty much, how do I say this? I loved how much I hated the story, and I hated how much I loved the story, because the couple, I guess, like I said, I saw a lot of myself within the couple, but then they become really, I think, insufferable towards the end, which is just kind of the natural progression of the story, and I won't spoil it more than that. But I started to really hate these characters, and I guess that's why I started to hate this story, but I loved it at the same time, because I don't want to become these insufferable characters. Being an expat as well, I don't want to become these people that are struggling to find their identity within themselves, and they're clearly struggling with that, and so because of that they project it onto the society they're living in, and they struggle to find their place within the world that they exist in. I think it's also a really interesting story, because even though it's, I guess, masquerades as a fiction story, it is not really a fiction story. It almost feels like it's a fictionalized essay to make a public comment on millennials, maybe, because that's kind of like the age they are in the story and the age I am now. So it feels like it's kind of like a commentary on that, and being these digital nomads that we're now seeing more and more of in the world, as the world shifts more to an online sphere, having these digital nomad workers that are jumping from city to city, but because of that they're not having any solid roots and anything to tie them to anything in particular, and the isolation that they are feeling as a result of that, the loneliness that they are feeling as a result of that, and therefore the lack of identity that they're feeling as a result of that. I thought it was a really interesting story. I mean, perfect title, Perfection, because they're constantly seeking that perfect life, and it really is a commentary on what people see online, via Instagram or TikTok or one of these social media sites, the perfectly curated photos, versus what is actually going on behind the photos, the exhibitionism that is going on, the performance, the performative aspect of life that is currently being very much seen through the social media lens. I thought it was just a wonderful story and made wonderful comments on that. Very much worth a read, pretty short. I think it's 112 pages, so pretty easy to read in a couple of sessions. Really, really enjoyed it. It was longlisted or shortlisted for the International Booker. It did not win this year, but very worthy to be up there, because I thought it was a great story and very much well worth the read. Fitzcarraldo editions, great little cover. I would rate this, probably a 4 out of 5, I think. Next up, we actually have the winner of the International Book of this year. So this was up against Perfection. Heart Lamp by Banu Mushtaq. I'm going to hold it up for the benefit, of course, for those on YouTube, as always. This is not a novel. It's 12 short stories comprised. It was written between 1990 and 2023, and they are comprised in this particular edition. Again, I really like this cover. Very simple, the name, the title, and then a quote on the front. I really quite like that because it's, I guess it's just a way to engage you as a reader before you even open the cover. I really like this. It's the only one, though, that I haven't finished just because it is short stories, and I very rarely read short stories cover to cover. I would be honestly surprised if anyone reads short stories cover to cover. Let me know if you do, because that to me just seems baffling. It is about Muslim women living in southern India and the experiences they have. So for that reason, I didn't feel like I could recognize myself in the same way that I could in Perfection. But of course, it's an incredibly important tale because it brings light to women that have been subjugated, especially under a patriarchal society, and gives them a voice, which of course is incredibly important. I really like this because even though it is dealing with some pretty hectic, some pretty dark things, some pretty tragic things, I still felt like a lot of the women in these stories had a lot of humor and good humor about themselves, and it's as if they almost, in some of the stories, it's as if they almost understood the box that they exist in, and so within that box they find the beauty in the world, and they still managed to find some good humor within the world, which I really, really liked. It felt, Heart Lamp, I think, is really beautiful because it did feel like tales that really came from the heart. And because of that, there was, some decent humor. Not necessarily, you're not laughing out loud, but there's moments where it's quite heartwarming. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. So, I didn't read all of them. I think I read 6 of the 12. I'm very happy that this one, I think it was better than Perfection. I haven't read all the books from the International Booker, of course, so please don't come for me if you disagree with that. But when I read Perfection first and then I read this one second, I was quite happy that this one. So I thought the stories in this were incredibly personal and obviously bring attention to people that have probably been vastly overlooked, Muslim women living in southern India under a patriarchal society. It's very important to give a voice to these people and to shine a light on them as a people. So that's really great. And just really nice stories as well. Some dark moments within the stories, but like I said, just the humor that I was able to find, that the characters were able to find within themselves and the moments and the existence they're currently living through, I thought was really, really nice. So Heart Lamp by Banu Mushtaq. Hold it up again. What would I rate this one? I would probably rate this one, I would rate the first 6 stories probably a 4.4 out of 5, I think. The 4th book I read this summer is probably my favorite book that I read this summer out of these 4 books. It's called The Moustache by Emmanuel Carrere. I'm going to hold it up for the benefit of those on YouTube, as always, because the cover is honestly shocking. I think it's a really crap cover, to be quite honest. I think it would turn a lot of people off. And even though it's pretty much exactly portraying what the story's about, I still think it's a rubbish cover. It almost looks like it's a print-on-demand kind of book that you buy off Amazon or something, and you could do so much more with this story. The story is, I think, absolutely fantastic. My only downside was the very, very end, the final scene, which I just didn't go the way I wanted it to. But again, that's just me being picky. It's a wonderful story in that it's about a man that has a moustache and he shaves his moustache off, thinking that he's going to sort of get this big reception, and then no one notices he's shaved his moustache off. And that sounds very quirky and absurd. And it is absurd, but it actually very quickly turns into this very dark psychological horror story. And it's all about sort of your self-perception and your perception within other people and your identity. And it's everything that sort of unfolds from that, and it becomes this absolutely absurd tale. I mean, a French writer, so absurd writing. Psychologically, just a horror-filled story as the story continues to build and build and build, because there are many, many twists throughout this story, even though it is incredibly brief. It's incredibly sparse, 180 pages, but I don't think there is a single word wasted here. There's a lot of humor within this story in the absurdity of the story itself, but the absurdity is actually quite horrifying, and there are some pretty grisly and gruesome scenes within this story. But it's absolutely fantastic. I thought it was incredibly I don't want to say underrated just because I've never heard of Emmanuel Carrere, but pretty much I went out and bought another book by him straight away because I was like, I've never heard of this writer and he is masterful and I just want to read more of him. And I don't know why I haven't heard of him before. Probably quite big because, you know, it's an incredibly well-revered story. I looked online and a lot of people have read this story, so that's really cool. If you've never heard of it, I genuinely would recommend it. Please do not be turned off by the shocking cover, which is simply a razor and a pile of hair. I didn't describe it for those listening, not on YouTube. But the story itself was just a shining light. I thought the end was just going to end in a very different way. I won't spoil the end, but it still ended in the second best way that I think it could have ended for the story that it is. I won't say any more than that other than please do check this story out or check the writer out because it was absolutely fantastic. Very sparse, not a word wasted, not overwritten, really great and really, really interesting. The Moustache by Emmanuel Carrere, great book. I would rate this one probably a 4.7 out of 5. Well, that was my summer reads for 2025. I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you maybe found a book you'd never heard of and now want to check out. As always, thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. If you would like to like and subscribe, I would greatly appreciate that. But I think it's time to end this episode. So today, to take us away, I think A Passage from Perfection by Vincenzo Latronico. And I loved this passage because it pretty much just summed up what feels like, I'd say, the last 12 years of our lives. Hopefully you read this and let's see if you can get all the references. An egg became more famous than the Pope. A highly contagious virus raged through West Africa. A billionaire poured a bucket of ice on his head. A fashion brand exploited East Asian sweatshop workers. A young woman recorded all the time she was catcalled. 2 African Americans were killed by the police. A man went around filming first kisses. A plane vanished en route to Beijing. A woman was beautiful. An apartment full of plants was beautiful. A vegan quiche was beautiful. A child needed money for chemo. Time disappeared.